Right, let's make a start. Okay, thanks for joining. It's, oh, let me just let some people in the lobby. Won't be a sec. Right, okay. This is our first beer and chip session on a Friday afternoon. The idea is that you're sitting there with a lovely cold one and a packet of chips, or if you're in the UK, which I think a couple of people might join us from the UK in a bit, then you can have that with your cornflakes. Although actually it's probably 2 o'clock in the morning, so maybe you are still up drinking. Let's hope so. Um, yeah. So what is this session all about, and who's it for? So it's really about small and medium-sized businesses in New Zealand. Now, when we're talking about New Zealand, then small and medium-sized might be a little bit different to the size that you're used to in, say, the UK or the US. Predominantly, our customers are between the 1 man to 250 man or woman kind of user seats. So that's what we're looking at. It's not a techie session. It's for those who own those small businesses and those who find themselves with that lovely position of actually being in charge of IT. So might be the office manager who can actually right click instead of left click, and it's all of a sudden you are the IT person. You know how to do this. So it's for anyone who's really responsible for the data security and day-to-day IT management within your company. So that's really how that's what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to give you an example or a few examples through this session. So why do we actually want to do this session? We have found over the last 3 months, probably, in fact, ever since we came back from Christmas, that attacks are absolutely going crazy. Obviously, since COVID hit, then it started to rise, but since January, it really has taken off. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, and we'll go into some of those. But I think one of the main reasons is as we got into that working from home scenario, and as we got into it was really a right, come on, guys, we've got to start working from home. There might be 30 staff that need to start working quickly. And I think that businesses got into that mindset really quickly and had to make a lot of quick changes to their IT security to be able to do that. And I think that there hasn't been a lot of revisiting to that to say, well, right, okay, so all these loopholes that were opened, what's happened? And you have to revisit that and then go back and say, well, let's concentrate on the security and get that back to where it was or better. And there are also lots of people now working from home, and that kind of opens up it's a whole new lot of risks that for companies. So where is the data that you have? What are the devices that people are using to access your company data? And just the connection methods as well. How are people connecting to your servers and to your data in general? So a whole bunch more risk that we now need to kind of look at and say, right, let's look at how we're going to actually secure our environments and secure our data. So like I say, not a technical session at all. There are there's going to be two main parts to this. So I'm going to go through a story, which is I'm hoping that most of you will relate to. You'll you'll notice that it's a general Auckland business story that could be any business at all. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. It applies to everyone, and this is something that we've seen across so many of our customers over the last few years, but obviously, as I say, getting worse and worse. So I'll talk a little bit about who we are as well and how this kind of session came about. So this session was sponsored by Ingram and Microsoft, and Ingram will be talking in a little while after me, in about, I don't know, 2.5 hours or so. No, I'll kind of cut it down to hopefully we'll be finished in about 20 minutes for myself. And then also, so it's Ingram and Microsoft who have sponsored this, and we're part of a security expert program. And it's a program that's been put together to raise awareness and skill levels between for IT service providers, and we've been lucky to be chosen as one of those to not only grow our skills, but to really it's an advisory capacity as well. We're going out, and this is pure advisory. This session, it's not a sales session at all. It's really to show you what we can do and show you what those threats are. So as I say, the first part's me telling you a story about what can happen. The second part's going to be Liam from Ingram Micro. He's going to show you through how you can protect yourself with Microsoft tools, and give you some facts and figures around what's actually happening at the moment, which might be a little bit of an eye opener. Then at the end, we'll come back to me. I'll talk about a little bit about next steps, and we'll wrap up there with a Q&A as well. And we've got Paul on the line from Microsoft, so if you've got any questions for Microsoft, he's there as well. If you have any technical questions, then we'll take those away, and we'll ask the boffins behind us. So, yep, without further ado, we'll move on to the slideshow. Now, can everybody see the slideshow? If you can just raise your hand on the on Teams, I'll be good that you can see it. Yep, good. That's awesome. It means you can see it and you can hear me as well. Okay, so a little bit about who I am. And the reason for this is just to really kind of give you an idea that I kind of half know what I'm talking about. This might not be a technical session, but I am kind of half qualified to tell you a little bit about this stuff. So this is me on the left-hand picture. You can see with the Rocket IT football team. Pretty in pink, they call us. We're actually called Norfolk and Chance, but yeah, that might be a bit racy for a webinar. So that's me in the under 20s team. You can see in the front row on the right-hand side at the bottom. That's me, and that's my wife next to me, who plays defence for a bit better than I do up the front. So we're celebrating there. We've actually won about 3 games this season, which was pretty good for us. And then on the right hand side, that's me at home with the 2 kids, which and my wife, which is pretty much what life's all about. And I've just noticed this morning when I put this up that you can see right up my younger son's nostrils, and you can see what he had for breakfast this morning. So probably not the greatest of pictures for the afternoon, but there you go. So where am I from? What do I do? So obviously I'm a UKan, also known as a trophy husband. My wife brought me over about 15 years ago, and we bought a house over here when we were over in England. So it all worked out really nicely for us, and I'm now a New Zealand citizen. So um, I could talk from a New Zealand point of view as well. My kids are Kiwis, which I don't stop telling them as well that they're Kiwis. So a bit about my background. I started in IT about 25 years ago. So I started when I was 10. Yeah, okay, all right. I'm a little bit older than that. I started 25 years ago and started with Microsoft exams. So those of you that remember the old MCSE in NT4 days, I told you I wasn't going to get technical. Anyway, so that's back in the old days. Those were the Microsoft exams that I took. And then I started off as a technician, and very quickly decided, oh my God, I'm terrible at that. And it really wasn't my forte. So now no one lets me touch buttons, and especially doesn't let me delete anything. And so I kind of quickly realized that my forte was management and surrounding myself with fantastic technical people who know exactly what they're doing in that technology space. But I've got enough, and I'm dangerous enough to know what's right and what's wrong, and how things are done. And obviously you keep that through your whole career. So that's where I came from. Then I went into management. I worked for the Metropolitan Police in London. I headed up the IT department for forensics, and then I came here, had a couple of IT manager roles, and then was in the senior leadership team for one of the larger cloud providers in New Zealand. So we dealt with large commercial clients and government clients down in Wellington, all up and down the country, had customers. And then I decided about 5 years ago, hey, no, time to go out, time to do something different. And I bought a company which was called IT Logics at the time, and I changed the name to Rocket. I thought it was onwards and upwards is one of my sayings, and it's all about boosting technology really. And what we actually do is we do IT support, and I think of that as being okay, anything with a button on it and anything with a virtual button on it, anything with a button in the cloud. That's kind of what we do. So we implement, we support, we maintain everything along that from that technical piece. But over the last few years, our role is becoming more consultancy and advisory, because we're actually going in, looking at processes and seeing how we can boost business from, okay, let's see how we can make things quicker. Let's see how we can um, use the technology that you've got, or bring the experience that we've got using other technology to get the most out of your technology, to get the most out of your business processes. And that's the way we think, and that's the way we look. I don't like to say this, and I should certainly say it with the door closed with my techie guys, although they don't mind. I say that the fixing and the implementations are actually quite easy. That's probably because I don't have to do them, but they're actually quite easy. But the fun bit is actually the improvement. It's all about improving your customers through technology, and that is the bit that gives us a kick. That's the bit that gives us the satisfaction. So that's pretty much where our company is now, and that's where we're going. And obviously, security is a huge part of that. You can't move forward as a company with your technology if you haven't got that security behind you. And I think a lot of business owners, if they aren't having a little bit of lack of sleep, should at the moment. There's a lot that can be done in this space, and this is part of this session. And it's um, obviously a lot of people couldn't make it at this time of the day on a Friday because of lots of, actually they're probably already having their beer and chips. But I think it's something that as a country and as business owners, we actually need to take a little bit more note of what's going on in the rest of the world and what is happening here. And I'll talk a bit about that later. So that's the first slide. Okay, I did say 2.5 hours. No, I'll speed it up now. So this is, like I say, this is a story, um, and I want it to reflect. And I'm not using a certain business here. I'm using examples from all sorts of businesses brought into one story, so you get an idea of what is actually happening out there. So, without further ado, let's move on. So, this is a day in the life of Lucy Webster. So Lucy is the office manager at Bruce and Sons wardrobe manufacturers in West Auckland. Totally the same as, I don't know how many of our customers. There's around 30 staff there. Um, they, funny enough, manufacture wardrobes, and they've been doing it for 30, 40 years. So, and most of the technology is 30 to 40 years old, to be honest. And if it's not, it's just been updated servers along the way. So there's not really been a lot of change over that time. So Lucy is your average fun-loving Kiwi. She likes a good old glass of wine at the weekend. She likes taking walks on the beach, like the picture. And she likes spending time with her kids, which we all do, unless they're being exceedingly annoying, which, if you've got teenagers like me, is actually most of the time. When Lucy gets up in the morning, and this is a picture of Lucy here, and she's pretty tired. She looks like me in the mornings, actually. She doesn't really want much hassle. I don't know what it's like in your houses if you've got young kids as well. It's just a stressful time. So she's making sandwiches for the kids. She's shouting at them to get out of the house, to do up the shoelaces, all that usual stuff. She just has enough of the stress in the morning. So one of the things that she really likes is, last Christmas, her husband bought her one of these Google Home things. And I don't know if you've got one of those. I've got one that sits in the corner, and occasionally I use it, but not often. It might just change color every so often. And think, oh yeah, that's over there. So it listens to what you say and does things like turns on the lights and TVs and plays some dodgy music that I used to listen to 20, 30 years ago. It's the only thing in the house that actually says good morning to her, because when I come down in the morning and get my breakfast, I say hello and how was your sleep? I usually get up, and that's about it. What she does, she asks it about the weather, how long it will take her to get to work in Auckland traffic, which is about 3 days, and what's happened in the world overnight. She also asks it for a few positive phrases just to get going in the morning, just to get her over what the family have brought her down to. So Lucy gets to work every day, 7:30 on the dot, Monday to Friday. There's no one else in the office when she gets there, so she knows that she can get stuff done before the factory starts up, all the whirring noise, and everyone comes in on the Monday morning and says, "Hey, did you see this? Did you see that TV?" all of the stuff. And oh, I drank 15 pints last night. All of the stuff that she thinks, oh yeah, okay, well, my life's pretty humdrum anyway. Anyway, she logs in, she goes to get a coffee. Now, the reason why she goes to get a coffee, and this might be a little bit old school, but I think it still happens, takes her about 20 minutes while the screen pops up till she gets to log in. And what's happening is she's got all these black screens with white writing coming up. Seems to be getting more and more and more of these black screens with white writing coming up. She knows she should tell the company, the IT company, that it takes this long and that all these boxes appear, but all they do is log a job and they get back to her in about 5 days and say, yeah, we're looking into it. So she's been thinking for about a year, oh, you should get round to changing those guys, but they don't really charge much and it would be too hard. And I know as well that these guys are going to make me try and change my password every probably 30 days or 60 days. And I will get so much grief from all those guys in the factory if I have to do that. So she's kind of, oh yeah, I don't really want to do it. Then she says, oh well, look, also I've got the same password. So I've got Metallica123. That's awesome. I've just worked out, I keep spelling it wrong. So I've just put a post-it note on the side of my thing, on my side of my screen. So I know how to do it now. And my bank's got the same password, Facebook's got the same password, Twitter, the whole lot. So she's cool now. She doesn't want to go around, changing all her passwords all the time. So she's gone to the kitchen, got that first cup of coffee, starting to wake up a little bit. Now it's time to see who's been over, emailing her overnight, because it's those things where you say, oh yeah, I don't look at emails overnight. Well, she actually doesn't. She just gets up in the morning, and that's her first job when she gets in. First email of the day. Third notice. Please pay this invoice as soon as possible. It says you are 60 days overdue and will no longer be able to supply your product from tomorrow. Please open the PDF attached and pay within the next 24 hours to ensure continued service. She sits back in her seat, and I know what you're expecting me to say. No, she doesn't. She doesn't open it. She thinks, right, seen these before. I'm not stupid. I'm not going to open that. Delete. Awesome. Good start to the day. She's not done too bad there. So the next email of the day says, hi, Lucy. Can you please pay Princewood Panelling Company the 54K that we owe them this morning? They have sent me through some new bank details. I've put them below. Let me know when it's transferred. Cheers, John. John's the boss. He's the CEO. She knows that they do owe 54K to Princewood Panelling Company. It's a furniture company. It's quite, it's quite logical that that's the case. He does work all kind of hours. So, yep, fair enough. Always sends emails at that time of night. And he does say, cheers, John. She knows it's got to be him, and she knows that it's going to be something that she needs to do quite quick. So, pays it. The next thing is, and you're going to get sound effects here. That's the best it gets. It doesn't get any better than that with sound effects. Pete, the foreman at the company for 25 years. He's at the door. He's like a piece of furniture. Yeah, all right. He's like a wardrobe. Anyway, everyone loves old Pete. In the last few weeks, though, he's been kind of angry and withdrawn, just not himself at all. So Lucy had tried to talk to him, but he just didn't want to know at all. But there he stood this morning, a little bit, he's kind of emotional, and yeah, so he just wanted a quick word or two. So it turns out Pete had received an email a couple of weeks ago from someone saying that they had his password, which they had sent to him, so he kind of knew that the game was up. They said they'd been watching him online. They'd looked at the websites he was going to. They were going to tell all his friends and work colleagues that unless he paid a certain bit of Bitcoin, that he was going to tell all his friends and colleagues. Furthermore, kind of turns out that he did have a little bit more to hide. So when he told Lucy the kind of sites he was looking at, she pretty much knew that his career, his untarnished record, and probably even his marriage were over. Not only that, she'd have to call the cops. It was that bad. So how the hell they got Pete's details? And what a Monday. It's getting kind of stressful. So she sent Pete home in a blubbering mess. So, and she had to tell the boss. I mean, what else was she going to do? It's boss time. So talks to her boss and says, "Well, I've got some pretty bad news." So she tells him about Pete and what happened, and yeah, it obviously doesn't go down well. She says, "Well, got a bit of a porn problem with Pete," and John said, "Yeah, um, I've had 5 of those emails this week." And she kind of goes, "Oh, really?" She says, "Yep, yep, and my mates have had them as well." Ah, okay. So then the penny starts kind of rolling around in her brain. And then she says, "So I put that payment in this morning, the one that you asked for last night, through to Princewood. Uh, what email? The email that you said about 54K. Mm, okay, this isn't good. So it's going from bad to worse." So she decided she better contact Pete and let him know that the email wasn't legitimate. So she tried to open her Excel sheet of names. There's no kind of um, there's no HR system. It's pretty much just an Excel sheet. Looks at it and goes, "That file kind of graphic, that one that I just click on normally, it's just a different color. It doesn't look right." Clicks it. Nothing happens. Nothing at all. Okay. Well, the boss said he didn't want backups, but because he said he didn't want backups, I've been taking this USB drive home. All I do is I plug it in, I copy everything on there, bang, I take it home. Awesome. It will be great. Then she thinks, hold on, that's been in my handbag for the last week. Okay, well, at least I'll have something. It might be a week old. I can rekey everything. Puts it in and off it starts whirring. It's, oh, thank God for that. Double click, double click, double click. Absolutely nothing. So by this point, she's the only things that can kind of come into her mind. Well, what the hell's the business going to do now? We got 54K down the drain, and we seriously can't afford 50K down the drain. That's pretty much all the cash they've got. The foreman's left. He's got 25 years of knowledge. There's nothing really written down. So what are we going to do? How are we going to make this stuff? And not a single file in the business can be opened with no backup. So if they can't pay their suppliers and they can't pay their staff, how on earth are they going to be running for, another month or so? It's going to be that bad. It's a pretty bad day for her. So that night, feeling a bit like a muppet. Sorry, I couldn't resist the Kermit the Frog with the wine. So Lucy sits down and there's a massive. Well, she's got 3 bottles here, but there's a massive glass of wine. She opens up her Facebook, thinks, "Oh, well, I'll try and take my mind off it." Notices her profile picture's changed. Then she looks at her recent posts. Oh no, that's not good. Everyone's going to see this. Oh, then you're going to get second sound effects. Another knock on the door. It's Pizza Hut. Strange. Didn't order a pizza. Oh well. And then another one. Domino's. And then there's a lovely curry. And then there's Chinese. So she opens her email to complain. Sees all the orders and the websites she has registered at in the last hour or so. All the while, Pete the foreman sitting at home with his grandson, who's teaching him how to send someone into a digital hell. Only cost him $50, and all she's getting now is phone calls, emails. Absolutely everything's coming through to her. She just can't stop it. So we saw Lucy at the start. That's what she looks like after one day. So bear in mind, if you have all that going on in one day, yeah, you're going to be pretty unlucky. But all of those are really good examples of what has happened to some of our customers and some of the people that we know. They've all had these, and we all have seen these or similar at some point. So what we're going to do is just give you a couple of hints and tips in the next bit to kind of say how you kind of help yourself with that. One of the biggest threats that I want you to take away as well is really people and training. We'll see some of the Microsoft products and how they will actually kind of take away some of these security risks. But at the end of the day, there's always an element of staff training, and there always will be. It's how to identify risks, and IT has always been and always will be. There will always be a risk of your staff who, whether they knowingly or unknowingly damage your data. So that is your biggest risk. And the last thing before I hand over to Liam is we do have and I can say she'll be right because I am a citizen, so that's fine. So we have this thing that she'll be right, and that because we're small and we're at the bottom of the world, and hey, COVID's probably made this worse for us. We're actually thinking we're more safe than we are. Um, I can guarantee you that we're not. We are definitely being targeted. Uh, we see it every day. We see servers that we manage being attacked absolutely every day, and it's only because of the security that we have in place that stops that. Um, but we have got to actually start making an effort across New Zealand businesses to actually block attempts. And it's not that hard. It's just taking that road and spending the time to do it. I can't hand on heart say I can block everything, and I don't think anyone would in the world. But don't wait until you're bitten. That would be my biggest advice. It's too late then. It's too late to make the investment of time and investment of money if you need to. Um, just please recognize your risks and talk to whoever you need to who can fix the risks for you and block those holes. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Liam from Ingram to run you through some scary facts and give you some tips and tricks.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. I'll just pull my screen up for everyone. Cool. Should be able to see that. All right, so just a little introduction to myself. My name's Liam, and I've been with Ingram for about 3-4 months now. Um, and I look after the Microsoft Modern Workplace business. And yeah, as Simon said, this sort of all came about from the Microsoft Expert program, which is all centered around security and your data. And I come from a security background, which is quite cool. So definitely have a good insight into this kind of stuff. But I think the first thing, so in terms of my discussion topics and what I was going to talk about today, I'm not going to hold you for too long and bore you, but I do think it's really important to understand what the main threats we see are, how New Zealand's cybersecurity landscape shapes up, because I think a lot of the stats that, or anything that we see is, US based and things like that, which just obviously are less applicable to us. And then some of the challenges small and medium businesses face in New Zealand because of this. And lastly, how the Microsoft 365 products, mainly Business Premium in this regard, actually helps protect these customers and can really help you. So just to reiterate a little bit about what Simon already said around some of the common cybersecurity threats we see, they come in a lot of different forms, but fundamentally they're all existing for one reason, and that's to make money and steal money. And that may not be physical money, that might be data, which they want to end up using to sell on and things like that. So it's all done in a variety of ways, but it's all about monetizing whatever information hackers or these people are stealing. The most common one we see is phishing, and again, Simon did cover this pretty well before. It's obviously not the phishing we think of going in the ocean. This is essentially a cyber attack that uses really clever disguised emails that may look really real and legit, with the right logos for maybe KiwiBank or things like that. But obviously, the goal is to deceive the recipient, and just believing that it's maybe something that they want or they need, and usually that hacker already knows that they have an affiliation to. Maybe it's eBay or again one of their banks. Data breaches and that's kind of alongside ransomware, is one of the other most, I guess, prevalent security threats that we see out there. So data breaches, it's usually when private or confidential information is released into environments, or more importantly, unsecure environments. So like confidential work data, credentials, or anything of the sort, it becomes publicly available, and that's a huge issue because again, if it's work data, I mean, that's, yeah, I can't express how important that may be, but also your personal data, right? And again, as we talked about before with your passwords, a lot of these passwords we use, and I think I'm guilty myself as a Kiwi having the same password for so many different things. But yeah, at the end of the day, it can all be used for the hacker's actual personal gain, which can either cause harm to the business from a reputational point of view or from a financial, or both. And lastly, ransomware. So again, not trying to be techie at all with this kind of stuff, but ransomware is usually the most malicious. So that is something where it actually blocks access to, might be a device, a system, or maybe a file, and it locks it using encryption software, and demands money to unlock it. And there's a lot of really big examples that I'll cover off shortly that you may or may not have seen in the media. And it essentially makes everything unusable and inaccessible to the end user. So what do we see in New Zealand around some of the threats and in the headlines? These are just some that I've pulled over the last sort of 2 years. I think some of the biggest ones that we've seen recently were things like the New Zealand Stock Exchange had a really big attack where it actually locked down for about a week and halted trading in New Zealand. So that's one of the more extreme examples. But there's even things like the Auckland ASIC store was a good one, and I like to use that as an example because it sounded quite funny, by the stores, on Queen Street, facing the street, playing pornography. But it was much more than that. It was that was just the gag behind it. They actually used the Chromecast to get into the network. That were displaying the content on the TVs before they changed it. And again, they use this Chromecast to access the database in the ASIC store and actually steal the customer data from there, which obviously had a lot of their account details, so their passwords to log in online. And again, a lot of these customers use the same passwords for everything. And you might wonder why that's important. Well, having these passwords to these different accounts obviously allows email access and a whole bunch of other stuff, which allows you to change and steal a lot of different data. So we see a lot out there in New Zealand. I guess one thing I always like to say is we're no less or more secure than the rest of the world. So in terms of the landscape in New Zealand, and I guess the data from what we see in terms of the areas and the monetary gain that we see lost. Now, first of all, I guess this is data from a website called CERT New Zealand, which is the New Zealand website to report all cybercrime, and they deal with any sort of cybercrime cases in New Zealand. So we see obviously a huge increase year on year in threats. I think that's pretty apparent and makes sense. But in terms of entities affected, what I found really interesting was 40% being businesses affected, and obviously that's generally your small and medium businesses, versus 60% or almost 60 individuals. So there's a pretty big split there between that. But it's and I think most businesses will take more security precautions than your average everyday device user. But I think it's really interesting to see how many businesses are still affected by that. So when we look at the sort of monetary loss behind it, we're seeing up to, I mean, again, this data for last year, this was only their half yearly report at 7.8 million, but the year before, they're looking at 16 million, the year before that 14. And this is only people that have actually reported these losses because, I feel like a lot of people, I guess, feel a bit ashamed to report it, or don't think that they can do anything when they do report it. So they just don't. In terms of where we see these threats, as you can probably imagine, Auckland is the highest density of these cyber attacks because, of course, the most businesses are here, the most head offices and things like that are obviously centered here. But it's really interesting to break that down geographically and see that. If you look at just some of the data to put into perspective, we see about 1,300 incident reports per quarter, about almost $4 million per quarter loss, and with a total of about 50 million in direct financial loss. It's actually been reported to CERT, and CERT has only been operating since 2017, I think it was, so it hasn't been around a long time, which is quite interesting. But I think the government sort of understands the gravity of the situation now, and really wants people to be aware of that and take these precautions that you can obviously use. So just from more of a Microsoft standing point, sort of coming back to product challenges that small medium business owners face. I mean, I think first of all, is your business data safe? So again, without getting too techy into that, people actually having security policies to customer databases. manually configuring any of your data policies? Is there any sensitive data that is not secured, whether that's your customer's credit card data or any sort of personal identifiable information, whether that's driver licenses, passports, things like that. Then, of course, from your business data, we look at your actual devices themselves. So, managing users from your workplace attempts to actually access those networks from a remote location. That is that under control of your IT department, or is that managed in another manner? Demanding proof of identity for accessing these attempts, if they're initiated from unexpected regions or countries, being able to actually block these access attempts from certain locations or certain devices at certain times. And lastly, risk of external threats, and that's kind of what I spoke about before, and probably the one that we want to be, sort of most aware of and talking about the most, as these external vulnerabilities really refer back to those sort of phishing scams and those ransomware attacks. Um, so, being able to identify vulnerabilities across your organization, actually being able to launch investigations when there has been a potential security incident, and tracking these different threats, whether it's something like malware, ransomware, or one of these phishing website URL links sent to your emails. So some of the ways that Microsoft protects against these main threats, so protecting that business data, you can actually, you're detecting when employees are sending confidential information, like credit cards and that, across these platforms. Encrypting, so actually locking the sensitive emails or any of this data with the click of a finger. Controlling who actually can access the information, and who and when they access it and on what devices. And then, of course, actually having safe archiving of the sensitive data, putting it in the right place once it's been in use. From a secure device level, we obviously want to be able to manage each company owned device. Of course, managing the network access from people maybe either networking accessing in to the network remotely or from locally. Applying certain conditional access, so around who can access certain documents or files or drives maybe, and then managing company files and emails opened on a personal employee's device. And lastly, against the threats and the actual cybersecurity external risks that we see, using Microsoft's Advanced Threat Detection Plan, or ATP they call it, to actually first of all, you can simulate these attacks to see if testing your cybersecurity readiness. Launching automated investigations and responses to any attacks that either you definitely know it's an attack or you're not sure. So before they really blow up or get larger from the get-go. Blocking and tracking any of these sophisticated threats. So if there is a ransomware attack, it's going to be blocked and mitigated, and same with anything like phishing or malware and of the likes of that. And lastly, enabling things like multi-factor authentication. So using things like when you want to log into a website, maybe having a text coming to your phone just to give you a certain number, to obviously enter that and ensure that that is actually you trying to access that device. So I guess lastly, why use Microsoft 365 for your security? Well, Microsoft is obviously the world leader in these productivity apps, whether it's Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, that you're all probably very familiar with. But more importantly, in the last sort of few years, investing so much money into the cybersecurity sector, more than 1 billion annually put into that research and development of that. Actually 6.5 trillion into AI detection. I think that's one of the most important parts, having a threat protection network that can actually not only detect old threats, but also new threats using, again, advanced artificial intelligence. And lastly, just having over 3,500 experts just dedicated to protecting any of your data and obviously developing these new products and new threat detection plans. And so that's it from mine, guys. I don't want to go any deeper or take up any more of your time, but yeah, I really wanted to just highlight a little bit about what we see in New Zealand, how that sort of applies to us, and I guess what Microsoft can do to obviously help mitigate any of this, as a lot of people already use all the Microsoft suites and products, but I think it's really important to obviously be able to come back and understand that. Cool. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Liam. That was awesome. Some of the figures and facts in there are quite frightening, but it's really good for everyone to see how much can be done. I think that's the reassuring part of it. So, yep, thank you, Liam. Awesome. I just want to finish with a couple of things. So, there's the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, and there always has been, which is your backups and your restores. And I always say, hey, look, you can pay an IT company or you can do them yourself. There's a lot of money to do your backups, but absolutely no good at all if you can't restore any of your data. It's really, really important to make sure that your data is restored, because if something is restorable, because if something does happen, then you want to be able to get your data back, and you want to have that shortest period of time between taking that back up and the restore, whether it's 15-minute replication of your information or whether it's once a night backup. You look at your data and your applications and see how much data can you actually afford to lose. Obviously, the more you back up, the more it costs, but it's your business. Your data is your business. It drives your business, and you'd be very surprised that when you do look at your applications and what you actually use day to day, you'd be really surprised at what data that you'd need back first. We all assume that it's going to be email and calendar appointments. It's actually not. It's more about paying your suppliers and paying your staff, and just day-to-day information that's stored. So really needs some good thought behind it, and so backup and restore, like I say, massively important. And the very last part is really about the next step. So along with Microsoft and Ingram, we are able to supply a number of free audits, and we do supply, I'll come to security audits in a second, but we can do free audits at across any business, and we'll come in and look at hardware and software as well. And both, it's because the two you can't really look at separately. So we come in and we have a look at your perimeter. We have a look at what software you're using and how you're using it. We look at who can access your data and from where, and how you're accessing it and from where. And we build you up a plan of basically what needs to be done and give you some priority and urgency around it. So that's really a service that we offer to everyone. But following this meeting or following this webinar, if anyone wants to contact me, we can offer you a free security audit as well. And that's a templated audit that will give you a real in-depth. The way it will go into depth in all of your cloud security and all of your day-to-day functions that really you need to protect, and it will give you a wide scope and a vision that you can take to whether you're the owner of the business, or you need to take it to the owner of your business and help them sleep better at night. And that to me is part of security, is helping you go to sleep, lay your head down on the pillow and go, actually, I feel safe that my data is not going to be attacked. And that's what it's about as a business owner. So let's dive into a quick Q&A session. I'm very aware that we've been on for 50 minutes, so if we cut it down to 10 minutes, has anybody got any questions at all? You can take yourself off mute or post them in the comment section. Awesome. That's what I like to hear on a Friday. It's beer and chips time. I think I'm going to go and do that. Hey, look, thank you so much. And thank you to Liam, and thank you to Paul from Microsoft and Ingram. And you have a lovely weekend, and I'm sure that we'll catch up soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Liam.